So let's try to make a test for the home page. We see that after logging in, the user gets a home page where the products get listed, and there's some filtering where you can choose the type of the product, the category of the product, or filter by name. There's also pagination, and another feature is to update the currency rates. So if we look at a bit at the architecture of this page, there's actually an iframe that loads the home endpoint, and there's no routing in this project like very common nowadays to have a router that translates the endpoint to a specific class, but rather each endpoint is a specific folder with the index.php file that renders the front end. Then you have the server that acts as a backend. So there are a bunch of methods that can get called, and everything is tied up by the LegacyApps framework. For example, in the common file, using LegacyApps, you define the backend server. I'm including some global functions, and then you have to register all the functions. So what's happening is that on the front end, the framework will generate JavaScript functions for all registered functions, and then within your front end you can call the actual methods on the backend. So that's handled by all the calls are asynchronous, and that's handled by the backend that's creating an objects to respond. So let's see this in the browser. If, for example, I filter, okay, let me open the network tab to see what's happening, and I'm using only the fetch and XML HTTP request object request. So if I'm filtering by raw materials and finished products, you notice that for each action, a call was made to the server file. So let's look a bit at the call. All the requests are happening on post. So there's a post invocation on the server.php with a payload that describes the action that you want. So first is a function, then some random, I think it's a timestamp or something, and then the arguments for that function are passed as XML attributes. So we get to see the attributes from the form, and then the second parameter is passed are the attributes from this area for paginating. So this, well, everywhere you'll see a grid, there's this pagination happening. As a response, the server creates an object that gets translated into an XML, and this part contains the action that needs to happen on the front-end side. So any updates, any content updates get rendered on the server, and then LegacyApps deals with with the updates on the front end. So that's handled for you. It was pretty interesting at the time. It looks more like a remote procedure call approach rather than the more popular RESTful APIs today. But it really got the job done at that point to make an interactive application that would more or less feel like a desktop application. So everything you can see here happens asynchronous on the page. And yeah, that's how it works. Now we can map, having this in mind, we can map a bit the process from backend to frontend. So we have identified the root, the folder where the code is. Then we can go for the front-end part, and we can notice that on the ready action, when the page is loaded, is calling the method lista with the form values from the filters and the form values from the paginator. So in order to map the actual call, let's go to the server. All the functions are prefixed with xAjax, but on the backend you will find them without that prefix. Let's also try to debug it. Well, I think the listener is already started, so we can see the actual call. So when we do a refresh, let's also include recipes. Okay, now it stopped the execution and it called the listing method. So yeah, it's composing a view for the products, applies the filters if they are available. We should see the ones for the product type here. Okay. So this was pretty raw at that point. Notice that it's very prone to SQL injections and a lot of security problems when you use this style of writing SQL by hand. In the end, is preparing the query. Then it gets the data paginated, and now it's creating that response object. So it's an object on the PHP side that has, for example, you can assign into a specific ID on a specific attribute the content that was generated on the backend. And this creates that XML part that will get rendered in one way on the front-end side. So now it's returning the object, and let's step out again. Okay, and if we continue, we see also the recipe. So this concludes the debug. Okay, so what we want to test is actually this method. So we saw there are some dependencies on the session. The user needs to log in, and let's see if we can put together on a test for this method.